Hey everyone, this is Tim here at Instaclustr. Welcome to the third episode of InstaBlinks. Today we are joined by Ben Slater, who is Instaclustr's Chief Product Officer. I've got him to talk here today about open source technologies and the trends we're seeing in financial services. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tim. Great to have a chat.
Fantastic. Thanks, mate. So Ben, you've been with Instaclustr a long time. You've been involved with a lot of large organizations deploying open source technologies at huge scale, and specifically financial services organizations. Would you mind just maybe giving us a brief background into some of the trends you're seeing in this space, especially around data layer technologies?
Yeah, for sure. So I think financial services is definitely one of the verticals, one of the industries where we see a lot of adoption of the kind of open source technology we work with and growing adoption. I tend to think that's driven by a few different factors. The big external driver we see with a lot of financial institutions is just needing to open up, and to a fair degree in most jurisdictions that's driven by sort of open banking legislation, which actually mandates people to provide APIs into the details that they're holding on customers to allow innovation. But even where there's not a mandate, there's generally a desire amongst financial services to provide more access for consumers and for their customers to their data that the financial institutions hold on their behalf. Mm-hmm. And that just drives more transactions, more usage of their IT infrastructure. And essentially they find that their traditional and their proprietary software just can't scale, either in terms of actual technical scaling, just can't work at that kind of volume that they're looking at, or doesn't really scale in terms of the financials. And often these traditional systems are licensed on a per transaction fee, or at least expensive mainframe cores, those kind of things. And so they use the kind of Cassandras and Kafkas and those kind of technologies that we work with to augment their core systems and offload some of the processing on those to serve these new use cases in a way that's cost effective and actually scales, and also meets the 24/7 availability expectations of today's consumers, which their legacy systems just aren't engineered, and you have to have downtime and those kind of things.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So you've mentioned kind of a couple of use cases there, like open banking and around core systems. Why is open source so well positioned for those kind of workloads? And are there any other specific applications you've seen in the financial services space that tech like Kafka and Cassandra is really well suited to?
Yeah, look, I mean, the open banking is just kind of one example of providing more services to consumers. And there's also fraud detection, for instance, anywhere where they're trying to do more with the data. I think it's a big change to change particularly for a traditional bank, to change your core system that you rely on to actually keep the bank balance, just everybody's bank balances up to date and to process the transactions. But those are expensive to operate. So Cassandra and Kafka often went the innovative applications around the side with open banking, consumer banking applications, fraud detection, all of those kind of things.
A lot of those traditional vendors, a lot of the big four banks in Australia and also across globally, we've generally seen a big transition to cloud first or even a cloud migration strategy. How do you see the adoption of open source technologies to sort of aid those kind of initiatives for these banks?
Oh, it's definitely a key enabler of that. These technologies that we're talking about, Kafka, Cassandra, Elasticsearch, Redis, they're all designed in the cloud era, and they're all designed to provide reliable, scalable applications on cloud-style infrastructure. Historically, we've had reliability through hardware level engineering, cloud-first engineering. We tend to engineer around less reliable servers and get the reliability at the software level, and that's what these technologies provide and really can help you enable cloud migration.
Yeah, fantastic. So what are some of the biggest, I guess, challenges that you see when you hear the word digital transformation and things around, adopting event-driven architecture and things like that in the financial services industry or any industry for that matter?
Yeah, I suppose a digital transformation is almost just another example of those kind of innovative applications that I'm talking about, and where the lack of flexibility in your legacy systems can hamper that, whether it's moving to more real-time fraud detection or more real-time information back to consumers. And offloading your data onto a copy of the data, a copy of the processing stream to a more flexible architecture, based on open source technologies where you're not constrained architecting around license costs, can really help to accelerate that and enable that digital transformation pathway that a lot of leading financial services are looking to be digital organizations first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that we work a lot with some of these big enterprises within Instaclustr. What we find, I think, is a lot of them, they start adopting open source technologies like Kafka and Elasticsearch and Cassandra because it's really easy to do so and it doesn't cost anything, right? And so you get a lot of this pre-production and QA and testing environment starting to reap a lot of benefits. But then when it gets into productionizing these environments, there crops up a lot of challenges from an operational perspective, security and reliability. Are there any kind of words of advice or key things that you think, these organizations need to get right to productionize these type of open source workloads?
Yeah, I think you do have to keep in mind that open source is a different world to perhaps your traditional licensed software. It probably generally comes with the assumption that the organization operating it is a bit more sophisticated potentially than some of the traditional things, and perhaps have the ability to look into the code and figure things out for yourself, to design your own operational environment around it. There's pluses and minuses to that. If you're an organization that doesn't have that background, doesn't have that, then partnering with somebody who does understand that, can bring that expertise and help you, which obviously is what we do at Instaclustr.
Do you have any kind of thoughts around security when we're talking about these more mature open source platforms like Cassandra or Kafka, and how organizations kind of navigate that landscape?
I think that there is no question in my mind, there's no barrier to real security with these applications. They're used in lots of very secure places and well architected and surrounded by the right controls and the right architecture. They are as capable of being secure as any other technology. Where you sometimes can run into the sort of hurdles is where you're applying more of a tick box security approach without actually thinking about what you're getting there, and you may not have every single feature that your tick box checklist has. So as long as you're approaching security with that point of view of actually trying to be secure rather than trying to tick boxes, there's no question you can achieve your goals with this open source technologies. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, Ben, thank you very much for joining us, mate. That's been really insightful. Obviously, as we've touched on there, Instaclustr we work a lot with financial services organizations to really fill in a lot of these gaps with regarding production readiness of these applications. But if anyone has any thoughts or questions around this discussion, I'd encourage you to reach out directly. We'd love to have a chat with you about your adoption journey. Thanks again for watching, and remember, always be clustering.